Hi everyone. More from Poems That Changed Me. This is still Dean Rader. I have a exciting announcement for me, and I think it's going to be an exciting turn of events for people who watch this series, or even those of you who are coming upon it for the very first time. I have loved doing this over the course of these 11 months. This is now the... Fuck you, Dean. Hi everyone, this is Dean Rader. More from Poems That Changed Me. This is the final installment for November 2021, and I am very happy to announce that this project will continue in 2022, but not with me. That's the most exciting thing of all. It's going to happen very much like it is now, posting a video every Wednesday, but in 2022, instead of 52 videos of Dean Rader, it's going to be 52 videos of other writers and poets and editors and folks who work in the world of poetry. So I think this is going to be really cool to hear some of your favorite poets talking about a poem that was transformative for them. I've been thinking a lot over the course of these 11 months about poems that changed me, and how and when you come across poems that change you. It's harder for a poem to really do something now than when, say, you're in college or graduate school, and how perhaps those early transformative poems are influenced by who's in anthologies, who you're being taught, and who people are reading at the time. And I was thinking about how the poets who were really important to me when I was in college and graduate school may or may not be the kind of people who undergraduates or students in MFA or PhD programs are reading now. For example, someone like Mark Strand, who when I was an undergraduate and in graduate school, everyone was reading. Everyone knew that poem, Keeping Things Whole. Everyone knew his poem, The Mailman. Everyone knew his poem, Eating Poetry. I haven't heard people talk about Mark Strand in years, though he is an amazing poet and was a really important poet for me as I was thinking about my own poems and becoming a poet. The Not Keeping Things Whole, which came out in the late 60s, I believe, but a 1970 book by him called Darker, is a book that I never hear people talk about now, but that I found utterly radical when I first came upon it. It is an amazing book. I highly encourage anyone who is thinking about being a poet seriously, track down Mark Strand's book, Darker. It's a series of phenomenal poems, some very conventional, very traditional. Others sort of are in this vein of surrealism, and others are just utterly experimental. He's got a great poem toward the beginning called The New Poetry Handbook that I think I memorized at some point. The other thing I really remember about this book is how many of the poems are dedicated to other poets. And that was really interesting to me. He seemed to be, both through the dedication and through the poems themselves, entering into conversation with the history of poetry. And I love his embrace of that lineage. I'm going to read a poem that, when I read it, it really reminded me of a Georg Trakl poem. And it's a poem called From a Litany. And this is a poem that I feel like a lot of poets are writing right now. I see these kinds of poems a lot, and every time I come across them, I am thrown back to this poem by Strand, who may have just been thinking about Whitman. Anyway, this is called From a Litany, and you can see the poem is a litany. But anyway, it reminds me a lot of the gratitude and praise poems I'm seeing now. From a Litany. There is an open field, I lie down in a hole I once dug, and I praise the sky. I praise the clouds that are like lungs of light. I praise the owl that wants to inhabit me, and the hawk that does not. I praise the mouse's fury, the wolf's consideration. I praise the dog that lives in the household of people and shall never be one of them. I praise the whale that lives under the cold blankets of salt. That's a good line. I praise the formations of squid, the domes of meandra. I praise the secrecy of doors, the openness of windows. I praise the depth of closets. I praise the wind, the rising generations of air. I praise the trees on whose branches shall sit the cock of Portugal and the Polish cock. I praise the palm trees of Rio and those that shall grow in London. I praise the gardeners, the worms, and the small plants that praise each other. I praise the sweet berries of Georgetown, Maine, and the song of the white-throated sparrow. I praise the poets of Waverly Place and 11th Street, and the one whose bones turn to dark emeralds when he stands upright in the wind. I praise the clocks for which I grow old in a day and young in a day. I praise all manner of shade, that which I see and that which I do not. I praise all the roofs, from the watery roof of the pond to the slate roof of the customs house. I praise those who have made of their bodies final embassies of flesh. I praise the failure of those with ambition, the authors of leaflets and notebooks of nothing. I praise the moon for suffering men. I praise the sun, its tributes. I praise the pain of revival and the bliss of decline. I praise all for nothing because there is no price. I praise myself for the way I have with a shovel, and I praise the shovel. I praise the motive of praise by which I shall be reborn. I praise the morning whose sun is upon me. I praise the evening whose son I am. I love reading that poem. I haven't read it out loud in I don't know how long, 20 years maybe. But its rhythms, its contradictions, its symmetry really come back to me now. I hear so many poets in these lines. Whitman, of course, that reference to James Wright, the poet whose bones stand upright in the wind when he turns to dark emeralds, the poets of Waverly Place and 11th Street, clearly a reference to Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, James Schuyler, the New York poets. I think about Melville and the whale and the cold blankets of salt, the reference to the customs house. I think about Hawthorne. I love this poem so much, and I love that reading it and going back to his book Darker has kind of thrown me back to this time in my life when discovering poetry was like learning about some sort of new God. I really encourage you to check out this poem and check out this entire book. Strand, I think, is one of these poets who is in danger of sort of sliding into oblivion. And it would be great if poets might rediscover some of his work and perhaps do with his work what he's trying to do with other poets, and that is enter into conversation with it, because it's worth revisiting.